Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. On the morning of September 1st, 2019, tension filled the Shade family home. The day before, John Shade, a senior member of the family and brother of Margaret Ann Sumney, had passed away in Pennsylvania. Relatives were trying to contact one another to share the sad news and discuss the upcoming memorial arrangements. However, one of John's sisters couldn't seem to get through to Margaret, which struck her as odd. After several failed attempts, she reached out to Helen, Margaret's eldest daughter from her first marriage. Helen immediately joined the efforts to get in touch with her mother, yet neither calls nor text messages received any response. Hours went by, but nothing changed. Helen grew increasingly concerned. Margaret had never gone off the radar before, not even for short periods. At one point, a call finally came in from Margaret's phone. But it wasn't Margaret on the line. It was her son, David Lee Sumney Jr., whom the family called Junior. Hearing his voice surprised Helen. Junior hadn't lived with Margaret for quite some time. She quickly asked where Margaret was. In a flat, emotionless tone, Junior replied that she was sleeping. This answer immediately raised red flags for Helen. It was well past 9 a.m. by then, and on a day like this, Margaret would never have still been asleep, especially when expecting important family news. Helen asked her brother to wake their mother, but he refused and said to call back later. He dodged further questions, and the call ended as abruptly as it had begun. After hanging up, Helen's anxiety only deepened. Her brother's demeanor seemed cold and uncharacteristic, and the fact that he was at their mother's house was suspicious. She knew Junior had been living on his own for quite a while, and their relationship with Margaret had been strained. His evasive responses only fueled her worst fears. Margaret Ann Sumney, née Shade, was born on June 28, 1958 in Pennsylvania. Her parents, John and Wellen Shade, were well-known and respected figures in their community. They raised 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son. Margaret was the youngest in the family. From a young age, Margaret was surrounded by creativity. Her parents owned a family dance studio, a beloved spot among locals. Margaret practically grew up within the walls of the studio, immersed in the world of dance. She didn't just participate in classes. Over time, she became an instructor herself. Margaret taught ballet and helped her parents organize annual Christmas performances. Gradually, her role in the family business grew more and more significant. People around Margaret described her as warm, energetic, and outgoing. She had a natural ability to connect with both adults and younger folks, carried herself with a lively spirit, and always took pride in her appearance. Her looks and confident demeanor made her stand out at social events. In everyday life, Margaret was known for being organized and dependable, with a clear sense of purpose and a determination to achieve her goals. At a young age, Margaret entered her first marriage. She tied the knot with John Joseph Thierry. However, their union was short-lived. The relationship faltered as John grew distant, showed little involvement with the family, and avoided taking on responsibilities. Their marriage eventually ended in divorce. From this marriage, Margaret had 2 daughters, Helen the elder and Peg the younger. With the arrival of her daughters, Margaret's priorities shifted. Raising them became her life's main focus. After the divorce, the responsibility of raising her daughters fell entirely on Margaret's shoulders. Their father played little to no active role in their upbringing, so Margaret had to balance working and caring for her daughters alone. She had no outside help. At that time, her family was still running the dance studio, which allowed her to combine her role as a mother with her professional activities. Despite the challenges, Margaret managed well. Helen and Peg grew up in a stable environment, an atmosphere that emphasized discipline without harshness. After spending several years on her own and navigating difficult relationships, Margaret eventually met David Lee Sumney, a dentist with a standout career and an impressive background. He was charismatic, successful, and had a magnetic personality. A Harvard graduate, David possessed not only expertise but also charm. His professional success was notable, and it added to the confidence he exuded as a potential life partner. Their relationship blossomed quickly. David proved to be attentive, caring, and steady, soon becoming not just Margaret's friend, but her trusted companion. In 1986, just a few years after they met, the couple decided to make their relationship official. They got married, and for the first time, it seemed Margaret had found the stability that had been missing from her earlier life. Life with David was anything but ordinary. Their home in Pennsylvania wasn't just beautiful, it was spacious, modern, and tastefully decorated. Their financial stability allowed them to live comfortably without constant worry. Margaret, Helen, and Peg enjoyed the benefits of a comfortable life, and their house became a symbol of their family's success. In 1989, Margaret and David welcomed a son, David Lee Sumney Jr. This event marked an important new chapter for the entire family. David Sr. took an active role in raising his son, while also supporting Margaret's daughters. He quickly earned their trust, becoming a genuinely caring stepfather. Even though Helen and Peg were already growing up, he invested time and attention in their lives, nurturing their interests and needs. To the outside world, their family seemed perfect. A successful husband, strong bonds between all family members, and an evident love that held everything together. David made no secret of his affection for Margaret and her daughters, and his devotion to their son became one of his highest priorities. On the surface, their life appeared nothing short of ideal. From an early age, David Lee Sumney Jr. grew up surrounded by constant attention and very few boundaries. His parents didn't just provide comfort, they created an environment with virtually no limits. Any request he made was fulfilled immediately. Toys, clothes, entertainment, trips, whatever he wanted was handed to him without hesitation. Living a life of plenty, Junior quickly learned how to use this to his advantage. Over time, he stopped merely asking for things and started demanding them. Even in elementary school, Junior had mastered the art of using tantrums as a way to pressure his parents. He refused to comply with even the simplest requests unless he received some kind of material reward. Basic acts of cooperation, like completing homework or helping around the house, became bargaining chips. Simple gratitude or praise wasn't enough for him. He expected to be compensated for everything he did. As he grew older, his behavior only worsened. His parents continued to set no boundaries. Any sign of dissatisfaction from him was met with immediate concessions. Even the most unreasonable demands faced no real resistance. Both Margaret and David Sr. gave in to Junior, believing that by doing so they would maintain a close bond with their son and raise a confident individual. In reality, their actions only reinforced his sense of entitlement and superiority over others. One troubling episode that the family would never forget involved an animal. As a young boy, Junior found a small bird in their backyard. He picked it up and squeezed it so tightly that it didn't survive. What shocked Margaret even more was that he showed no fear or remorse. He calmly held the lifeless bird in his hands as if it were nothing unusual. Margaret, deeply unsettled by what she saw, later joked nervously with relatives that her son acted like a future criminal. Beneath her words, however, was genuine fear. This wasn't an isolated incident. From a young age, Junior showed a disturbing lack of empathy. He avoided emotional connections and felt no guilt for causing harm. No one in the family knew how to properly address his behavior. His parents continued to hope that he would grow out of it over time. Unfortunately, the absence of firm guidance only solidified these traits in his personality. In 2001, Margaret and David Lee Sumney's marriage came to an end. A relationship that had once seemed stable gradually fell apart. The divorce wasn't loud or messy, but its effects were significant. The division of assets and the sudden instability hit everyone hard. At the time, Junior was about 12 years old. After the divorce, Margaret was left with very limited financial means. The support she had previously relied on from David stopped. The income from the dance studio, which she had once depended on, no longer covered her basic expenses. The family-run studio had become unprofitable. Margaret eventually made the difficult decision to close it down. This wasn't just the loss of a job, it was the end of an important chapter in her life. To make ends meet, Margaret found work at a clothing store. The job wasn't glamorous, but it provided a minimal sense of stability. Meanwhile, the financial demands related to her son didn't go away. Junior continued to expect special treatment and made no effort to curb his high expectations. His behavior remained unchanged. He still demanded complete accommodation to his wishes. Despite the divorce and his own financial struggles, David Sr. continued to give in to his son's demands. He made efforts to maintain a relationship with Junior and provided financial support, even when it came at a personal cost. Instead of setting clear boundaries, he, like Margaret, chose the path of least resistance. The former spouses lived separately, but remained emotionally entangled by their mutual dependency on Junior's moods. He moved back and forth between their homes. Each parent kept fulfilling his wishes, often to their own detriment. Over time, the level of control Junior exercised over both parents only grew stronger. Even as their living conditions worsened, their habit of indulging their son remained unchanged. This period marked a critical turning point. Financial collapse, the loss of a stable foundation, and the breakdown of their marriage all combined with their son's increasingly unmanageable behavior. Neither parent could bring themselves to reassess their approach to parenting under the new circumstances. As a result, the entire family dynamic shifted to revolve around one person. In 2008, after reaching adulthood, David Lee Sumney Jr. enrolled at George Washington University. He chose to major in mathematics. His parents saw this as a hopeful turning point. Despite their exhaustion from years of dealing with his behavior, they believed that attending a prestigious university might introduce some much-needed discipline into his life. David Sr. took on the responsibility of covering his son's tuition. Housing near the campus was expensive, but the costs were shared between both parents. Margaret and David continued to fulfill their obligations despite their limited finances. Junior lived in an off-campus apartment, and anything he needed was provided for him. In 2010, Margaret decided to visit her son. She traveled to Washington, D.C. to check on how he was doing. During this trip, something happened that later raised many questions. Unexpectedly, Margaret called her daughter Helen and said she was at a hospital with Junior. According to her, her son had allegedly attempted to harm himself with a knife, and she had fallen and hit her head. The details were vague. Helen noticed inconsistencies. Her mother was evasive, offering few specifics about what had happened. When Helen arrived at the hospital, she learned that Margaret and Junior were placed in separate rooms, even though their situations didn't seem to warrant such separation. This struck her as odd. Medical staff were similarly tight-lipped and avoided giving clear explanations. There were growing suspicions that the incident might not have been as Margaret described. Given Junior's history of unstable behavior, Helen wondered if there had been a confrontation between him and their mother that involved physical aggression. Margaret's anxious demeanor and her tendency to excuse Junior's actions only fueled these concerns. No official investigation was ever launched regarding the incident. Neither Margaret nor Junior pursued any formal complaints or further explanations. However, not long after their hospital visit, it became public that Junior had been expelled from George Washington University. The administration cited repeated violations of rules and disruptive behavior. He had been skipping classes, getting into altercations, and disregarding the authority of faculty members. The expulsion came as a heavy blow to Junior's parents. After all their efforts and financial sacrifices, they had hoped for a different outcome. Instead of seeing progress, they were faced with undeniable proof that their son's behavior was only deteriorating. Junior was forced to return to Pennsylvania, once again splitting his time between his parents' homes. What was supposed to mark the beginning of his independent adult life ended in failure and raised even more concerns. In July 2015, a confrontation between David Lee Sumney Jr. and his father became one of the most devastating episodes in their family's history. Junior was 26 years old by then. He was no longer in school, wasn't working, and continued to rely entirely on his parents for financial support, with little regard for their circumstances. That day, Junior demanded money from his father to fund a trip. The amount he asked for was substantial. David Sr., who by that time was struggling with his own financial difficulties, simply couldn't meet his son's demands. He explained that a vacation wasn't possible because he didn't have the money. But Junior refused to accept this answer. Instead of ending the conversation, he escalated it, yelling and issuing threats. The argument turned physical. Junior attacked his father using brute force. He struck him repeatedly, even after David Sr. was no longer able to fight back. Neighbors, alarmed by the sounds of shouting and a struggle, called emergency services. When officers arrived, they found Junior still on top of his father, continuing to strike him. David Sr. suffered serious injuries. Medical staff documented brain hemorrhaging, spinal damage, and multiple bruises. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. After examination, doctors concluded he would need round-the-clock care. From that point on, David Sr. could no longer walk independently. He was eventually transferred to a nursing facility and was unable to return to work. Junior was arrested at the scene. Charges were filed, but the legal classification of the incident caused confusion and frustration among family members. Rather than being charged with attempted murder, authorities charged him with aggravated assault. Despite the severe consequences, the court set a bond, and Junior was released shortly thereafter. The victim himself was too debilitated to participate in legal proceedings. Once again, Junior avoided serious accountability. This incident shattered any remaining illusions the family had that his behavior could be controlled. After attacking his father and spending only a brief time in custody, Junior continued to evade meaningful consequences. Despite the severity of his actions, he remained free and behaved as if nothing had happened. Shortly afterward, he began telling family and friends that he had enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He claimed he had been selected for a position that emphasized discipline and order. Margaret, despite all the troubling events of the past, wanted to believe him. She was relieved to think her son had finally found a stable and respectable career path. Her understanding of military service aligned with the image of a strict, disciplined environment where individuals must follow orders and adhere to structure. For her, it represented a chance for redemption. However, no official confirmation ever surfaced. Family members tried to verify Junior's claims, but all information came solely from him. He never showed any documents, didn't wear a uniform, and avoided sharing any verifiable details. All efforts to obtain proof ended with vague answers. At the same time, Junior started focusing heavily on strength training. His physical appearance changed dramatically in a short time. He became much larger, gaining significant muscle mass, and his imposing presence became even more intimidating. Standing close to 6.5 feet tall, his size alone was enough to instill fear in those who had already witnessed his aggressive behavior. The changes in Junior's appearance were accompanied by shifts in his behavior. He became increasingly irritable, lost control over his aggression, and often resorted to threats. Conversations with him became unpredictable. He carried himself with an air of superiority, frequently implying that he could resolve any disagreement through force, and demanded unquestioning compliance from those around him. Family members, including his sisters, began expressing doubts about his supposed military career. Some openly pointed out that his behavior was inconsistent with the discipline expected of a service member. Junior responded harshly to such remarks, sometimes using intimidation tactics to silence any questions. He worked hard to prevent discussions that might challenge his version of events. In November 2016, another disturbing incident occurred at Margaret Sumney's home involving her son. This time, it happened at night. Intoxicated, Junior entered his mother's bedroom while she was sleeping and began to strangle her. He attacked suddenly, using significant physical force. Given his size and strength, Margaret had almost no chance of resisting. She woke up struggling for air, his hands pressing tightly around her neck. He didn't say a word. Her only option for survival was to break free and scream. Eventually, Junior let go and returned to his own room. Margaret immediately called emergency services. When officers arrived, they found Junior asleep in a nearby room, heavily intoxicated. Police documented clear signs of assault. Margaret had visible marks on her neck and bruises around her ribs. She told the officers that her son had tried to strangle her, mentioning that he had said something about it being a technique used in the Marine Corps. This claim raised additional suspicions, but at the time, the primary focus was on the assault itself. Junior was arrested at the scene. Prosecutors filed charges for domestic violence with aggravating factors. However, early in the proceedings, Margaret approached the authorities with a request not to classify her son's actions as a serious criminal offense. She argued that she didn't want her son's future to be permanently damaged by a felony conviction, citing his alleged career in the U.S. Navy as a reason. She asked for the charges to be reduced, claiming that Junior had acted under the influence of alcohol and was not fully aware of his actions. In her view, he needed treatment, not incarceration. These pleas convinced the investigators and altered the course of the case. As a result, Junior's charges were downgraded from criminal to administrative, with the main charge being domestic aggression. He avoided a significant prison term and was released shortly afterward. During the court proceedings, a critical detail came to light. An official background check conducted after the incident revealed that Junior had never been enlisted in the U.S. Navy. His claims of military service were fabricated. He had never been recruited, registered, or associated with any military branch. Junior's false narrative about serving in the military, which he had shared not just with Margaret, but with other relatives as well, had been a deliberate manipulation. It was crafted to justify his behavior and bolster an image of a disciplined, goal-driven adult. In reality, beneath that facade was someone prone to aggression, alcohol abuse, and violence toward those closest to him. Despite this revelation, Margaret's attitude toward her son did not change. She continued to hold on to the hope that he could still turn his life around. Her decision to defend Junior after the strangulation attempt baffled those around her. But Margaret remained consistent. She acted not out of logic, but out of a deep maternal attachment that chose to ignore the harsh reality. Yet another act of aggression once again passed without serious consequences for Junior. He returned to his usual lifestyle without facing any real punishment. It marked another missed opportunity to curb the escalation of his behavior. Later, during proceedings that considered the entirety of his actions, especially after the truth about his fabricated military service came to light, he was finally handed a real sentence. David Lee Sumney Jr. was found guilty. The court sentenced him to 16 months of incarceration. Even though the charge had been reduced, the sentence required time in a controlled facility. It was the first official punishment he had ever faced. While serving his time, Junior began working closely with social services. During conversations with counselors, he insisted that his behavior stemmed from alcohol dependency. He claimed he lost control when intoxicated and that his actions were the result of untreated addiction rather than inherent character flaws. This approach was strategic. He understood that presenting his issues as a medical condition could lead the court and social services to view his case more sympathetically. In his statements, he emphasized that he needed treatment, not isolation. According to him, incarceration would only worsen the underlying problem rather than solve it. These arguments made an impression on one of the social workers assigned to his case. A report was prepared recommending that Junior be transferred to a specialized facility, a rehabilitation center for individuals struggling with substance dependency. Shortly after the recommendation was submitted, the court approved the transfer. Junior was sent to a center located in Pennsylvania. There, he participated in a program that included therapeutic sessions, group activities, and strict supervision. Officially, he was now enrolled in a recovery process. During this time, Margaret once again became actively involved in her son's life. She visited him regularly, bringing clothing and supplies, and maintained communication with his program supervisors. Despite everything she had endured, she once more put her faith in the possibility of change. For her, the very act of undergoing rehabilitation was a sign that Junior was acknowledging his mistakes and working to overcome his issues. After completing the course, Junior was granted conditional release. He was placed in transitional housing, where he remained under supervision but was allowed to seek employment. Before long, he found a job. According to reports from the center, Junior displayed discipline and a willingness to adapt to a normal life. This created the illusion of real change. To those around him, it appeared that he was genuinely starting fresh. His mother and sisters hoped that his past displays of aggression were behind him. At that point, his behavior did not raise immediate concerns. However, a closer examination revealed that none of Junior's underlying attitudes had truly shifted. He had not accepted responsibility for his actions, had not shown sincere remorse, and had not truly confronted the harm he had caused. Everything he did was part of a carefully constructed facade designed to lessen external control and regain personal freedom. In August 2018, David Lee Sumney Sr. passed away at the age of 74. His medical records did not specify an exact cause of death. He died in a nursing home, where he had been placed after suffering severe injuries resulting from an assault by his own son. Officially, his death was attributed to a combination of age-related health issues. However, family members had no doubt that the events of 2015 marked the beginning of his physical and emotional decline. After the attack, his condition deteriorated sharply, and he was never able to recover. Brain trauma, spinal injuries, chronic pain, and reduced mobility turned his final years into a prolonged and painful existence. He lost the ability to live independently, could no longer work, and became entirely dependent on outside care. Although the family did not openly discuss the situation, the understanding that Junior had been the catalyst for the tragedy was shared by all. Margaret's sisters, her daughters, and other relatives recognized that none of the previous conflicts had ever had such devastating consequences. David Sr. had been stripped of the life he once knew, and his declining emotional state further worsened his physical condition. At the time of David Sr.'s death, Junior was free. He faced no additional charges related to his father's passing. No legal link between the 2015 assault and the death was ever officially established. Neither the police nor the prosecutors revisited the earlier attack to consider its eventual impact. At the funeral, Margaret remained composed. She did not direct any blame toward her son, despite the clear connection between the past assault and the death of her former husband. Even after all that had happened, she maintained her silence. Her reaction only deepened the tension within the family. Relatives believed that by avoiding punishment for the assault, Junior was effectively emboldened to continue his dangerous behavior without fear of consequences. His continued freedom was seen as a systemic failure. Police intervention came too late. The court treated the case too lightly. His mother defended him, and his father passed away without ever seeing justice served. In 2019, David Lee Sumney Jr. met a new woman through a dating app. Her name is not disclosed in the case materials, as she chose to remain anonymous while providing her testimony. Their relationship developed quickly. Before long, she moved in with him. At first, everything seemed positive. Junior was attentive, polite, and showed restraint, creating the impression that he had changed. However, his behavior soon shifted. He began imposing strict rules, controlling her every move, and demanding obedience. Any attempt at disagreement would trigger irritation and aggression. During their time living together, the woman noticed suspicious activities. Junior kept checks issued in his mother's name and used them to make purchases. When she questioned the legality of this, he claimed that Margaret was allegedly suffering from a mental health condition and could not manage her finances, and that he was merely helping her pay bills. Junior frequently forged her signature on checks. There were no legal documents confirming that Margaret had been deemed incompetent, nor was there any power of attorney authorizing him to act on her behalf. When the woman suggested handling the matter legally, Junior dodged the conversation, blaming slow bureaucratic processes. Although she suspected he was lying, she did not have enough evidence at the time to contact law enforcement. When the relationship deteriorated and she decided to leave, Junior could not accept the rejection. He persisted in trying to reconcile, continued to send messages, and showed up uninvited. After another rejection, he decided to use force. He lured his former partner to a hotel room in Atlantic City, where he held her against her will. Over the course of several days, Junior subjected the woman to aggressive behavior. She endured beatings, psychological intimidation, and restrictions on her movements. On multiple occasions, Junior strangled her until she lost consciousness. At one point, he believed she had passed away and left the hotel room. She remained unconscious, severely injured, and without access to medical help. For 3 consecutive days, hotel staff noticed that the "Do Not Disturb" sign remained on the door. A housekeeper, breaking protocol out of concern, entered the room and found the woman in critical condition. She was rushed to the hospital, and thanks to emergency medical intervention, her life was saved. Police quickly identified Junior as the suspect. An arrest warrant was issued. However, due to an internal administrative error, the documents were not uploaded to the federal database in time. This technical mistake allowed Junior to leave Atlantic City and return to Pennsylvania without immediate apprehension. By the time authorities realized the extent of the crime, he had already crossed state lines. Technically, the court order had been issued on July 16, 2019, but it was never entered into the national search system. As a result, when Junior was later detained in Pennsylvania on unrelated charges, officers failed to link him to the serious offense committed in Atlantic City. He was released because he was not listed as a fugitive in the federal database. This error represented a major breakdown in interagency communication. A potentially dangerous individual remained free following a violent assault on a woman. The consequences of this mistake would prove catastrophic. Soon, Junior would commit an even more brutal crime. On September 1, 2019, the Shade family suffered a loss. Margaret Sumney's brother, John Shade, passed away. Family members began calling each other to share the news and coordinate funeral arrangements. One of John's sisters tried repeatedly to contact Margaret, but all calls went unanswered. She eventually reached out to Helen, Margaret's eldest daughter. Helen also tried unsuccessfully to make contact. The next morning, on September 2nd, she kept calling, but still received no response. At one point, Junior answered the phone. He said he was at Margaret's house. When Helen asked to speak with her mother, Junior replied that she was asleep. He refused to bring her to the phone and suggested calling back later. His answers were brief, guarded, and lacked any real clarity. By the morning of September 2nd, the family decided to call the police for a welfare check. Officers arrived at Margaret's home and knocked on the door. There was no answer. The windows were closed, and the house appeared occupied, but no one came outside. After waiting a few minutes, the officers decided to force entry. Upon entering, They immediately noticed a strong odor and signs that something serious had happened. Bloodstains were visible on the floors and walls across several rooms. The scene suggested a violent struggle. Towels with dark brown stains and drag marks across the floor indicated attempts to conceal what had occurred. Margaret was found upstairs, in the bathroom. She was in the bathtub and showed no signs of life. Based on her condition, it was clear she had been deceased for more than 24 hours. Her body displayed multiple injuries, particularly to her head and neck. The position of the body, the nature of the injuries, and the extensive amount of blood throughout the home all pointed to a violent death. While inspecting the surrounding rooms, officers found a metal sickle with dark stains on the blade. It was located outside the bathroom, suggesting it had been used before the body was placed in the tub. Additionally, they discovered that a revolver previously registered to Margaret was missing. Only an empty box of ammunition remained in one of the drawers. These findings further strengthened suspicion toward someone with direct access to her home. The crime scene was classified as an area of extreme severity. Forensic specialists began meticulously documenting the evidence. The distribution of blood across various rooms, the volume of it, and the scattered items all pointed to a prolonged act of violence and attempts to cover up what had happened. Identifying the responsible party was only a matter of time. Following the discovery of Margaret Sumney's body and the preliminary examination of the scene, police launched an intensive evidence collection process. Investigators recorded the state of every room, collected physical evidence, and began analyzing the electronic devices found in the home. Special attention was given to a laptop and an external hard drive that belonged to Junior. When investigators examined the contents of the drive, they uncovered material that confirmed their worst fears. In a folder with an innocuous name, they found 277 photographs. These images were taken at various times after Margaret's death. The photos showed the body being moved around the house, and the time spans between shots suggested that the scene was staged over the course of several hours, possibly longer. The photos captured Margaret's body in different positions and locations, on the floor, in the bathroom, in the hallway. Some images were clearly staged. Junior deliberately adjusted angles and lighting, and in some shots he posed alongside the body. Several photos were blatant selfies. Junior looked directly into the camera, wearing a neutral or even smug expression, with no attempt to conceal his involvement. The deliberate setup of the photos and the sheer number of them ruled out any notion of an emotional outburst. His actions were systematic, calculated, and not impulsive. Technological analysis confirmed that the photos were taken at intervals, and in some cases with the use of a timer. Everything pointed to premeditated behavior rather than a crime of passion. On the laptop's browsing history, investigators found search queries made the day before and after the estimated time of death. The searches included detailed instructions on how to clean up after acts of violence, chemical methods for removing biological evidence, and the decomposition timeline of human remains at different temperatures. There were also articles on how to avoid detection in residential settings. These findings completely ruled out the possibility of an accident. Junior had actively researched how to commit a crime and hide its consequences. Moreover, he clearly did not expect the body to be discovered quickly. The search history suggested preparations for an extended concealment, including information about mummification, odor control, and the breakdown of tissues over time. Investigators described the scene as one of the worst they had ever encountered. The chaotic blood splatters, attempted cleanup, drag marks, and massive amount of digital evidence made the case exceptionally gruesome and cold-blooded. A psychological profile of the suspect began to form early in the investigation, a person devoid of empathy, highly calculating, and without moral boundaries. After the discovery of the body and digital evidence, suspicion fully centered on Junior. Police reached out to Helen, one of the few remaining family members who still had any contact with him. She agreed to help by luring her brother to the funeral of their uncle John Shade, knowing Junior would likely attend the service. When he showed up at the funeral, officers were waiting and arrested him. During the search, police found Margaret's personal belongings on him, including jewelry and checks signed in her name. Junior was formally charged with third-degree murder, theft, abuse of a corpse, and other related offenses. After undergoing a psychiatric evaluation, he was deemed competent to stand trial. In August 2022, Junior entered a plea deal, admitting guilt to third-degree murder. He was sentenced to a term of 20 to 40 years. With credit for time already served, he will be eligible for release in 2039 when he will be about 50 years old. Margaret's family viewed the sentencing as a betrayal. Relatives believed that the prosecution had accepted a deal that failed to account for the full scope of the crime. Her sisters and daughters publicly stated that the punishment did not fit the severity of what had occurred. In court, Junior apologized and gave a speech about remorse, claiming he didn't understand how he could have committed the act. His words were met with deep skepticism. Margaret's death was not a random tragedy, but the culmination of years of escalating violence and the complete breakdown of family boundaries. The family was left to grieve two losses within a short period, first John and then Margaret. Their story stands as a stark reminder of how unchecked forgiveness and the absence of limits can lead to devastating consequences. Helen severed all ties with her brother. Junior was no longer considered part of the family. All that remained was the pain and the bitter understanding that the system had failed too many times. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.